Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar hosted by NetCB in partnership with Micro Focus. Today, we're going to be discussing the Fortify technology set and its solutions around end-to-end application security. If any of you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to post them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your page. However, we will also allow for a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session toward the end of the webinar. From here, I'm going to be handing over to Hendrik de Bruin, who is our cybersecurity specialist and our technical operations director. He'll provide a brief intro into NetCB's partnership and how the Micro Focus Fortify solution set fits into our area of specialization. And thereafter, we're going to be handing over to Seth Robertson, who is the security specialist for Micro Focus, and he'll be running through the presentation with all of you or for all of you. And please enjoy. We'll chat at the end of the session. Thank you very much. Over to you, Hendrik.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So just to provide some context around Fortify and NetCB's partnership with Micro Focus and Fortify. During our engagements with customers, we've often found that the source of vulnerabilities within their environments typically originate from three main areas. These typically include your typical self-inflicted vulnerabilities, which is mainly due to poor policies within the organization, etc. Weak password policies, lack of password policies, lack of things like privileged account management, etc. The second category is really configuration vulnerabilities, where systems have been implemented in a insecure fashion or incorrectly implemented or configured. A good example of that would be members of a Active Directory domain admin group, those members being able to log into end user workstations, etc., where that could very possibly and very simply lead to credential dumping attacks and further on pass to the hash, etc. And then the third category is typically your software vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities we find is typically coded into these applications themselves. A good example of that would be SQL injection attacks or SQL injection vulnerabilities. Typically, the main reason behind these vulnerabilities existing is poor coding practices, where input validation standards are not being followed, etc. And this could lead to things like SQL injection attacks, local file inclusion attacks, remote file inclusion attacks, that ultimately lead to things like log poisoning and remote code execution. Even though Fortify can assist organizations in identifying vulnerabilities related to poor password management, configuration vulnerabilities, and so forth, today's session we would really like to talk about the software vulnerabilities and eliminating software vulnerabilities within your own development environment. So essentially ensuring that within your DevOps environment we include security. Because at NetCB, we firmly believe that security should be baked into a product rather than bolted on top. So ultimately, whether you are as an organization, a consumer of applications being developed externally to your organization, a lot of times those applications need to be pen tested, security vetted, etc., before they go into production. I know the banks, as an example, they have to have those products thoroughly pen tested, etc. Fortify can assist you with that. If you've got a in-house development environment where you produce software and applications for in-house use, etc., Fortify can assist you in identifying security vulnerabilities prior to runtime testing or user acceptance testing. And thirdly, whether if you are a development house producing software for commercial use within your customers, I think that's where Fortify is probably most relevant, because the last thing you want nowadays is suffering reputational damage because the software that you have developed perhaps had insecure coding practices, etc. And that could lead to a breach within that customer's environment for which you could ultimately be held responsible. So in saying that, as I mentioned earlier, NetCB firmly believes that security should be baked into the product rather than strapped on top or built on top. And yeah, our session specifically today deals with bringing security into your DevOps operation. And in saying that, over to you, Seth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. Thank you very much, everybody at NetCB for the opportunity today to share a bit more around, how we can help you put the sec into DevOps. I think it's very good intro that you did there, Hendrik. Definitely important, especially with Papaya coming into effect very shortly. Breaches is going to cost you a lot of money, and it could even lead to jail time. So very important to bake that security in there. So I'm going to switch off my video now as well, just to make sure that everybody can save a bit of bandwidth. And I'm going to start with the presentation. Thank you very much for everybody, and welcome. So the topic of today's webinar is all around it's time to put that sec into DevOps, right? And to achieve that thing called DevSecOps. And the first thing that we always have to make sure that everybody understand is to find out exactly what is application security testing, right? So let's maybe step into trustworthy old Gartner and see what their definition is in the space. They define application security testing as buyers and sellers of products, and specifically services as well, designed to analyze and test applications for security vulnerabilities. Now, there is 3 different areas of application security testing, which I think is quite important to also understand, and I'll quickly try and define them for you. The first one is static application security testing, or SAST, and that technology analyzes an application source code, its bytecode or its binary code, for these security vulnerabilities, and that's typically at the programming side of the SDLC. The next one is called dynamic application security testing, or DAST. And that technology really analyzes applications in their dynamic or their running state during testing or either in the operational phases. And DAST really simulates attacks against an application which is typically web-enabled, or that it's web services. It analyzes that application's reactions and thus determines whether it's vulnerable. And that's something that you normally get done by penetration testers right at the end of the cycle. But we really want to do this whole shift left thing, and we want to make this part of the DevOps lifecycle. The third one is called interactive AST, and that technology really combines elements of both SAST as well as DAST at the same time. Typically implemented as an agent within the runtime environment. So for example, in your application server where everything's running, and it will observe the operation and attacks and identify those vulnerabilities. Now, there are some other things as well, things like software composition analysis that helps you to identify open source as well as third-party components in these applications with their known security vulnerabilities. But I think, from a Gartner perspective, and that's all in the Gartner report that was released about a day ago, application security testing needs to be delivered either as a tool or as a subscription service. And Gartner themselves has seen that clients request additional services and some tools around AST in the last while. So, they started to include things like infrastructure as code, container security, fast testing, API testing, as well as cloud native support. But I'll definitely talk a bit more about those later on in the webinar. Now, I think this quote is quite important as well. So this is the current state of application security as defined by Gartner. So I'm obviously going to share these slides with you later on, but I think, the most important thing that's prevalent to me is the major driver in the ASD market in the support of these tools to enterprise DevOps initiatives. And that's really important, to bring that security into DevOps, as Hendrik explained. Now, the only way that you're going to get that is through things like integration, automation, and the agility. And I'm also going to talk around how our Fortify solutions actually can help you to achieve that. You're very much dealing with developers now if you want to do this, and the security specialists is really going to start taking a bit of a back seat here, and customers will start to expect that the developers start wearing a bit of a security hat as well. So I mean that's one of the important things I wanted to share with you. Maybe also just to say why Fortify. This report, like I said, was released in the last day or two. The Gartner 2021 Magic Quadrant for Application Security Testing, and Micro Focus has again been nominated as a leader. That's our 8th time now, and I don't even think that this let's call it this application security testing market has been along for that long. I think it's about 10 years or something like that. So again, why is Fortify the best choice for this? Very comprehensive across the application security testing market. Our integration capabilities, the automation capabilities, the fact that we've been around for so long with successful deployments under our belt, and the flexibility as either, on-prem, so you get somebody, for example, like NetCB to come and install everything for you and run it for you and train your people, or as a service. So we provide a complete application security testing as a service with our Fortify On Demand offering. So, coming back to our core topic today, why am I keep on noting around things like integration, automation, and agility? Adding security into DevOps really, is traditionally seen as something that adds friction to the developers. Things like scans take too long, scans happen too late in the process, auditing results require human people, to actually check things like false positives. Developers are too busy. There's so many things that the developers always complain about. So, it's very important for us to make sure that application security is not seen as a barrier when you want to make it part of DevOps. And that can really only be achieved things like integration, automation, and the agility that we have. For example, in the fact that auditing results need to have the least amount of false positives and false negatives. We've got things like machine learning and artificial intelligence that actually learns from the way that your organization's application works to actually start removing the things that doesn't really matter, to give you only the most important and critical things to go and fix, from a security defect side. Another thing that I think is quite good as part of this that I'm going to put a lot of focus on during this webinar is, some of the current AppSec trends. And I think it's very important, to look at what's happening, not just in South Africa, but, globally in the application security space. So, I want to start off with the first one here around AppSec tooling. It really needs to become embedded in the DevOps toolchain. I mean, that's the main core topic actually of today's webinar. Your AppSec teams will really have much less influence in this tooling that needs to become a part of the DevOps toolchain. Because of this development organizations that's been pushing back so long, They first had their big fights with the operations side. When DevOps just started, everybody was fighting between development and operations. But now you're actually going to start having that fight between development and security to achieve DevSecOps. So, we need to embed security scanning and a lot of tools that's currently out there that's being used by our customers, maybe open source tool, but it really only discovers a fraction of those vulnerability issues. So you really need to go and look for a robust AppSec tool that can find you all of those things rather than just checking that compliance box. The second trend that we have is something called container security. So I mean, it's all around the battleground for securing the software supply chain. And I think, there's a lot of more heightened awareness of the software supply chain with the SolarWinds hack that happened last year, but also with Equifax back in 2017. So we think that containers is really now the ultimate battleground here, as you have this multiple software supply chains converge when you build and deploy all of these containerized apps. So based on some emerging best practices, we can share some strategies around how you can shift container security left as well to complement your post-deployment runtime solutions. Firstly, maybe start off with securing your base image. You've got a centralized base image selection. You do some CVE scans on that. You harden those images. And then obviously, to start with securing the application itself with things like SAST or SCA and DAST, just like any other app. And then you also have to think about, building your images with the ability to scan Docker files. Those Docker files are things that basically define the layers that's used to build the containerized app. And that is also maintained with the app source code. So you can also detect, those traditional software vulnerabilities that Hendrik also talked about, things like hard-coded passwords. And that's unfortunately a very common mistake in Docker files. So that is our second trend that we're looking at. The third one is, with the adoption of cloud that's growing more and more, infrastructure as code. So let's maybe just look at that. I don't think there's a lot of customers that really do this fully yet. They think they are, but it's basically a process of managing and provisioning computer data centers through machine readable definition files rather than your physical hardware configuration side of things. So this infrastructure as code technology is being adopted more and more, because it allows for that rapid provisioning and deprovisioning and cloud deployments even of environments. So integrating both your static as well as the dynamic analysis of these templates that's being run in your CI/CD pipelines alongside the rest of the application, obviously, we can provide a more complete view of the actual risk. And I think that's very important coming to Papaya now as well, to be able to deliver this new experience to the developers now, to say, okay, this is the type of guardrails that you have to put in and make sure that there is no data breaches. Vulnerability management itself, I think, is that comprehensive view of risk, not just from an application side, but from the supporting infrastructure. So that's where your network vulnerabilities, everything becomes part of this big vulnerability management program. And application security testing plays a big role in there as well, because you will be aggregating all the different vulnerabilities from different tools and parts of the organization into a single view. So you can have a more realistic view, do your analysis and reporting, etc. Excuse me, I'm just going to drink some water. My voice is going. And, this can really improve the prioritization and aid in providing compliance requirements that you need to meet. So I think, it's really important to look at, not just application security testing, the space that Fortify plays in, but to have that bigger vulnerability management view and make sure that your AppSec tool that you actually have can become part of that in a seamless and automated way. Number 5 is all around ZestDust and DustDust becoming truly integrated. Now, they already complement each other, and by layering things like dynamic analysis on top of the static analysis, you can actually start gaining additional risk metrics, which allow you to see a more real-world risk picture. So while it is important to identify these vulnerabilities early in the development life cycle using things like ZestDust, it's also critically important to create feedback loops that can identify when those findings actually surface in a running environment. So Hendrik talked about something like a SQL injection, another type of vulnerability that's commonly found in applications called cross-site scripting. So if you have findings like cross-site scripting early on in the SDLC, and you have got the ability to detect those issues also in production, then you can start focusing developers training and those development resources to address that systemic problems that we have. So yes, I think that's very important, and Fortify obviously plays very strongly in both the SaaS and the DaaS market. The 6th trend is all around cloud native application security. So, the modern software stack that's going out there really starts including a lot of things called cloud native elements. So you have to think about AWS, Azure, even some Google Cloud platform that dominates the market. So you have to look at things like SDKs and APIs that actually integrates into those components to make sure that while this cloud computing offloads, many of the tasks to the cloud provider, the end user organization, your organization, actually still retains responsibility for securing the data that goes into the cloud. API scanning also, and the security around that is a top challenge still, and that's really a key part of this digital transformation journey, or the whole thing around the 4th industrial revolution. How do you actually achieve that? Securing those APIs is really still a top challenge to all our customers, and APIs are a rapid growing attack surface that's not really widely understood and really is overlooked by developers and application security managers. Now, if you look at the first steps that you can start taking, there is to start incorporating SAST in this DevSecOps pipeline for each independent component. Then API security really can start being incorporated with the DaaS scanning as well, at both the component as well as the system level APIs, because this is all around HTTP at the end of the day. The first step in your attack surface discovery means that you need to provide the endpoints, the parameters to actually constitute what that API is. And in addition to the what, you also need to do proper discovery to find out how it incorporates, and how this API is being used, business logic, those type of things. And that starts to get really complicated. The 8th trend that's around here is all around, another AppSec acronym. Now it's called FAST. Oh my word, it's functional application security testing. And that really utilizes the dynamic testing with functional testing to start creating a seamless, fully automated dynamic testing to be part of that whole DevSecOps pipelines. Now, this FAST capability integrates into your CI/CD pipelines and detects dynamic vulnerabilities based on your functional test that you run in your QA environment. Now, whether that be Selenium, whether that is Cucumber, whether it is the Micro Focus technologies that we have, that can all be used to test that application. And this technology will really allow you as our customers to test the most critical portion of your application with things like sub 5-minute scan times, without the complexity of setup and configuration. I did talk around, our partnership that we have as Fortify with Sonatype. And our Sonatype is one of those vendors that deal with the OSS side, so open source security. And it's a real critical part of DevSecOps. So, to succeed in this type of environment where you have to deal with all of these different open source and third-party components, you really have to look at running a susceptibility analysis program. Now, what does that mean? You are basically going to look at your vulnerable components that's either directly or indirectly being invoked, and being able to prioritize those open source issues will actually save you time. And if you save time, you will obviously save a bit of money as well on the investigation of those known issues. And even more time spent upgrading a library that has almost zero security benefit. Now at Fortify, like I said, we partner with Sonatype to accomplish this. And that way we can actually collect methods and functions that's signature based on all of these requests. So if you basically request a Sonatype scan, that Sonatype scan will scan various open source components that's part of your application. And we understand that there might be particular known vulnerabilities. If there's an update to that component, have it been patched, we'll generate all of those things basically as part of your application security test. I think the final one is all about, getting hacker level insight. It's something that is quite new in our product as well, and that resolves all around the dynamic scanning. That's basically evolving from a classic vulnerability type of detection into more of a risk assessment tool. So this hacker level insight is basically a technology that presents your developers as well as your AppSec teams with the same set of data that a hacker will typically use to perform reconnaissance and targeting. So adding that dynamically detected components and library reporting basically enable your DevSecOps teams to use this information to see what the hacker sees, and in turn prioritize your resources towards the most critical gaps in your application security posture. So now basically your developers can use this hacker level insight to better inform their own threat model. And that's a good foundation to any holistic application security side, that fostering of collaboration between the different teams. So I think that's basically it from my side, to share some of the current trends that's out there. My final slide that I wanted to share with you is all around our platform that we provide. Obviously, the solution's name is called Fortify, but it comprises of all the different things that we talk about. Number one is our automation platform to provide end-to-end application security. And again, this is available both as a SaaS or on-premise, or can even be run in a hybrid mode. The products there is listed in the graphic, but I want to stay more and share what is the different component that typically comprises an application security program. Number two, there's all around SaaS, the static side. From a Fortify perspective, we've got the broadest language coverage to make sure that you don't have to have different tool sets for different type of languages. Number three is all around the dynamic application security testing, which actually includes API testing as well. If you start looking at DevOps, that doesn't need to be part of the developers' IDEs and world, etc. We have this thing called Scan Central, which basically provides a centralized scanning way, to the ability to scale as the demand increases for scans to be run. Number five is all around, look at your open source security and Fortify's partnership with Sonatype can help you achieve that. And then you start moving into that whole thing of shift left application security testing, becoming part of the developer's environment. So we have some dev-friendly tools where we have plugins into the IDEs that's commonly used by developers. We've got a broad range of out-of-the-box integrations into the tools that you already use today in your DevOps environments, things like Jenkins or Azure DevOps or GitHub. There's many more. The last one is, or number 8 there, is all around, being able to deliver application security at the speed of DevOps. And we've got various things available, features that's part of Fortify that actually allows you to do a bit of a speed dial. So I'm happy for this scan to, just report on critical errors, and then it's going to run a bit faster. But the next time that it runs, maybe before it gets pushed into a different environment, maybe from dev to QA or from QA to production, I want to set that speed dial to run with everything and give me all of the results. So that's the type of things that we provide you. The machine learning with our actionable results feature there at number 9. We've got this great product that comes part of Fortify called Audit Assistant, that actually gives you that actionable results and removes a lot of the noise. You've got all the reporting, the management that gets fed from these different tools into that automation platform again. And then, that is where it basically starts feeding into the bigger vulnerability management side of things. So I think that's a nice holistic view to take on what we have available, but that's also basically for any application security side. My final thoughts, and then we'll open up for Q&A, is all around, the complexity of software that we have today. The frequency of releases because of DevOps really will continue to increase. And our software security research team really found that a vast majority, that's almost 80%, of web applications have at least one critical or high severity issue. And application security really needs to be embedded earlier in the SDLC and must not provide any friction between the development and security teams. The trends that we discussed today really fit into a modern development framework where security starts to be developer driven and is focused on actionable results that enable you to do digital innovation. So I think Fortify really lets you build secure software fast. That's our mantra, with an application security platform that automates testing, security testing, throughout the CI/CD pipeline to enable your developers to quickly resolve issues, strengthening their cyber resilience, something that I think is being heard more and more. I even attended the security summit from IT-Web in the last 2 days, or yesterday and the day before. And I think that was a key topic that came out. It's all around being cyber resilient. So Fortify static, the dynamic, the interactive, or even our runtime security testing technologies are available on-premise or as a service. And we offer you as our customers the flexibility needed to build an end-to-end software security assurance program. Now, we'd love to hear from you. I'd like to certainly know which of these trends interest you the most. Is there any other AppSec innovations that you are watching closely? So I really look forward to hearing some of your questions. Thank you very much to everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Seth. Really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure. I don't see any questions at the moment. It seems like there were a lot of customers that needed to jump off early. I'm assuming they had urgent matters to attend to. But just as a reminder, this webinar is recorded or has been recorded, and it will be up on our website at netcb.com. If you have a look at the menu section on the top and you go to videos or events, it'll be listed over there, and that will happen within the next 24 hours to 2 days. So anyone can actually go and replay it. And what I then encourage is, pop us an email, give us a call. If you have any further questions, you can email sales@netcb.com, and we'll be happy to answer those, and also schedule a one-on-one meeting for those that would like to know more about this very, very dynamic and interesting solution from Fortify, especially if you have even small to medium or large development teams in-house. But thank you very, very much again, Seth, and thank you, Hendrik, and to the rest of the team. And we will see you next time, probably next week or the week thereafter. Remember that we run webinars usually every single week, sometimes twice a week, and we'll continue to send you the invites.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you very much to all the attendees, and looking forward to hear a bit more about some of the challenges that you face, and see how Micro Focus as well as NetCB can assist you to address those challenges. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Cheers for now.